Thank you for having me. I'm actually going to touch on what the magic number is for O2 SAT. So I think that's where. So how Jeff Curlin found out. I'm actually work in Boston. Most of you know as an interstitial doctor, but I do work in hypoxia early in my career. And Jeff Curlin Googled me, and that's how he found out this. I wrote a lot of this stuff on the effect of cognition and hypoxia and what the magic number is. And mine is a little higher than you've heard. Let me tell you that up front. It's a higher number. So I want to, I have a slightly higher number. So what we did early in, this was about over the last 10 years, we looked at what does hypoxia do, low oxygen saturations do to cognition, and where this point should be. Now, surprisingly, none of these studies have been done recently because you cannot do any of these studies recently. So you'll see me quoting studies from 1969. And you talk about procedures that nobody ever heard of in this room, and I think which called Leland Fang is going to be the only one, and Lisa's behind there. I've heard of a few of the procedures here. So I just want to show you what we did was we looked very early at was there any studies to indicate whether low oxygen saturations affected cognition, and to us that means development and IQ. And that was the question we were getting at. Now, and we set out looking at a whole series of studies to see who had done it before us, and it was done. So the basic categories of studies where you see low oxygen saturations are sleep disorder, breathing, just like we heard, congenital heart disease. We'll talk about that in a second because some of the best results, and then altitude, and something to think about. And now, the big thing about all of these studies, there's exceptions to every rule. Now, I have a patient who has an O2 SAT of 69 who got admitted to Yale. So there's something different about that child. So you just look at that and say, really? And for years. And she's got a different type of disease. Now, basically what we did very early on, we looked at 43 studies and said, what does low oxygen saturation do to your, and what was the degree of low oxygen saturation? And effectively, more than, 75% of them showed that low oxygen saturation was not particularly good for your IQ, as you'd expect. Now, that's the reason why we give you oxygen. Now, lots of the studies were horrible. So you have to say one group was treated with oxygen, one wasn't. Can't do that anymore. Okay, that wouldn't sound a particularly cool thing to do. So what we have to do is we have to rely on history a little bit to come up with numbers. Now, I had real trouble getting this study in 1969. This is not online. And this is an old study. And what they did was there's two types of heart disease which has a low oxygen saturation called cyanotic. And then acyanotic means regular, like with no problems with oxygen saturation. And they looked at IQ, and these which it's going to bump me around here a little bit, and I'll go over here a little bit. But take a look here. IQ less than 90. You see the cyanotic have a lot of numbers there. So that means really that the low oxygen saturation is not particularly good for your IQ. Now, what they were trying to do at this time was they were trying to say when should we fix these kids? Should we fix them early so that they'd go back to regular oxygen saturation? That's what they were trying to do. And these were really the best studies. Now, here's another study. Now, and I'll go up and I'll point it up there a little bit. Now, look, there's two groups here. I don't want you to come. This is IQ over here. These were the ones that were blue, cyanotic. These are the ones who were not. So the IQ clearly is higher in the acyanotic. Now take a look at this study, 1967. Okay, guys, you see there's controls here. Some of these would not be tolerated anymore. Like this is just not acceptable anymore. And this is from Jane Neuberger. Now, Jane Neuberger is a well-known cardiologist at this moment in time. So this is when she was a fellow. And, her grandchildren come to see me now. That's what she points out to me. But she's great. And this is Jane Neuberger. Now, there is what they did then. And then you see how this was, you take a look here. This is 1984. So you see how the studies have graded it. So they said, if we fixed them early and they were no longer blue, would the IQ be higher? Okay, now I'm going to walk over to this slide again. So you see here, the age at which it was fixed. So if they fixed it late, IQ lower. Fixed it earlier, IQ higher. So there's some wisdom here. There's some wisdom here. So if you keep the oxygen up, the IQ should be fine. Now, so the other thing that we did look at that time was we did look at all this obstructive apnea. And we said, okay, if there's lots of studies done, and I put this up because the great question was asked. The great question, somewhere preceding my question. So what happens if you have sleep disordered breathing? That's with obstructive sleep apnea, just what we all talked about a few minutes ago. What happened if you had a problem, if you demonstrated a problem in a sleep study, what was the most likely thing affected? And the floor leveling question, my job was made a lot easier by the question. And you see, these are all the studies that have been done, listed over here. And you see in blue, this shows effect. Now, what I want to show you, and I'm going to walk over this again. See, here are all the studies. Here are all the studies. Okay. Now, here, see the thing that's most affected? Behavior. Remember the question was asked, we took them off oxygen. What was the number one thing affected? Behavior. So it's pretty clear that if you're hypoxic, it's the behavior. It's the behavior that you are going to see. So now I just want to show you something else that was really, really well done. I think I may have missed one. This is a great study. Now what I want to show you is because this is an optimistic study and it's where it is. This is the study that was Gozal that was quoted earlier, but let's just look at what he did. Now, what he did was he looked at kids who were snoring and had low grades. So these kids were snoring and had low grades. And I just want you to look at this bar. Okay? Now, I can take it off. All right. So if you look, I'm going to walk over here. So they're snoring, right? He fixed the snoring. The grades went up. Now, this occurred at 7 years of age. So what we're saying is the fix can be late. That's not true of adults, but it is true of kids. So there's wisdom in this study. So you see how you fix it. Now, this shows, all of us know this. So this just says the more you snore, the more hyperactivity you have. See, this number goes up. Okay, so these are the really good studies. Now, I won't show you this. Now, I want to show you this. And I presume this does mean that you shouldn't go to Denver, but that's another story. Now, glad Robin's not in the room for this, but that's the whole story. Now, look, what happened was they look at climbers, and I got into this because I was a climber. I do all this rock crazy climbing. So what happened here was they took people from low altitude and pushed them up to 8,000 and meters. Now that's pretty good level. However, it gives you an oxygen saturation of 90. Okay, and what you see is the cognitive function drops. See it over here? Cognitive function drops. So what the studies are saying is 90 might be your magic number. 90 might be your magic number. So is there consequences to hypoxia? And I'm not going to go on too long. So is there consequences to hypoxia? There is. And what is the magic number? I have a slightly higher number than my colleagues here. So because the reason why I have a slightly higher number is because there's a lot of other things going on with our children. So it's not just like what you call a regular kid with obstructive sleep apnea or another kid who's gone to high altitude who's perfectly normal. So the real question I would say, I would have, with this previous number was quoted as 88. I'm in the 91 range. And I like to keep the oxygens above 91. We do not have the problems of getting home oxygen approved in our state. Remember, we are a different state. So once we can document less than 91 for a drop, we do get home oxygen. So my magic number is 91. But I am hyper conservative. It could be a lower number. So just thank you, and I'm happy to take questions. Yeah. Leland, Leland, come on. You